Welcome to Making the Cut podcast with Chris Hill and Sean Winter, where we help you succeed in life and business by sharing principles and strategies that guide some of the most successful people in the world.
Welcome to episode 17 of the Making the Cut podcast. I'm Chris Hill with my co-host, Sean Winter. Today we have Peter Harrison, the CEO of Snagajob. Sean, how are you, buddy? What's going on in your world?
Yeah, a little under the weather, but getting better.
Is that from your most recent flight on United or?
Listen, I was shocked. When I was sitting on the plane, I look over and next thing you know, this guy's holding a armrest in the air and the top of the plane where the baggages was cracked open. I thought it was surreal. I mean, goodness gracious. But no, it was my little girl that got me sick. And, you know, I'm probably going to put this one in the bank. Maybe when she's 2 or 3, I'm not going to get her a present one year. I don't know. I don't know. I'm a little upset. This is the second time in 5 months.
Someone's getting coals for Christmas.
Yeah. No, I won't hold it against her. So what about you, man? How's things?
Things are well in my world. The only thing I'll say to you is, I think I would have leveraged that United flight experience, maybe cut myself on the armrest to get a few miles, a trip to come see you or something like that. But yeah, things are well, man. Yeah, I'm excited. This podcast has been awesome. We've connected with so many awesome people, and I think today will be no different.
Absolutely. Yeah. So I had an opportunity, as you know, to talk with Snagajob while I was at the NRA show. And I talked to Will Morris. He was sharing some incredible information about Snagajob, what they're doing, how many hourly workers that they have, how many companies are on the platform. It's this massive marketplace. So I thought, let's reach out to Peter Harrison. So that's who we get to talk to today. I'm very excited.
Yeah, for sure. And for anyone listening that doesn't know Peter or his story, he's a CEO at Snagajob, where he couples his professional experience with a strong passion for helping people find the right fit positions so they can maximize their potential and live more fulfilling lives. He works to position the company to job seekers and employers as a strategic partner that is helping to transform the marketplace for on-demand hourly workers through highly innovative technology. And he has more than 30 years of experience in the tech world, operating global businesses, enabling service companies. From 2001 to 2012, he served as the CEO of GlobalLogic, a full-lifecycle product development services leader, building the company from 20 employees to more than 6,000. His next company, Versata, he led the growth of revenues from 1 million to 56 million in 4 years. How about that, huh?
Well, that's it? Goodness.
Hey, it did, however, culminate in an IPO in 2000, which is a time ranked in the top 25 best openings of all time.
Yeah, that's incredible.
He's originally from London, so he's got a fantastic accent, and I'm excited, Sean. I will let you have the pleasure of starting things off today. What do you say?
Absolutely. Let's do it. So, Peter Harrison, thank you for joining us today. It's a pleasure to have you on the show.
Well, thank you. It's great to be on the show. Thank you.
Absolutely. So let's dive right in. Can you give us a little snapshot of who is Peter Harrison?
Yes, well, if it's not apparent from my accent, you can probably gather I'm not from around here. I grew up actually in the UK, in London, and spent my first 21 years there, and then came to the US in 86, and have been here ever since. And I think if you were to sort of characterize me, I fell in love with technology when I was 13. And really followed that love for technology to the States, because back in 1986, the UK was probably 10 to 15 years behind in technology, and if you really wanted to be at the cutting edge, you had to be in the US.
Is there a certain individual in your life that gave you served as a mentor in those early days, or got you excited about entrepreneurship and the business world and maybe tech in itself?
So definitely entrepreneurship. I have to give my credit to my father, who from a very early age really taught me to own it. That no one was responsible for me but me, And I don't mean that he was, mean-spirited about that, but he definitely, he was great at empowering me to sort of really own my destiny, own my life, own my career, challenging me. Why do you want to go to school? Why do you want to go to college? What are you trying to do? I think he really is my true sort of business mentor, my original business mentor. And then meeting the computer, that was just a really happenstance. I just happened to get introduced to it from a very early age, and it fell in sort of a love affair from day one. I was never very good with letters or words, but I was always good with numbers and math. A little dyslexic, so it sort of, I think I found my calling when I met a computer.
Outstanding. Now, what was your first entrepreneurial venture? Was this Sear, or did this happen even before that?
Yes, no, my first was Sear, and I had the good fortune to work at a bank in New York. I should say good fortune. I didn't enjoy working at a bank at all, but I met some wonderful people there, and a group of us got excited about trying to do something together, and so we spun off. A group of us spun off and founded our first startup together, a company called Sear Technologies in 1990.
Now, you guys were incredibly successful with Sear, scaling that from a startup to some pretty good numbers. What was that first period like? Was it a guessing game, or did you have a pretty sound strategy that helped you kind of get from A to B?
I think we had a little more than most startups, because we had managed to sort of formulate a little bit of what we wanted to do while we were still working at the bank. So it wasn't like we just simply hold ourselves up in a room and try to figure out what we wanted. So day one, we kind of had a pretty good idea of what we wanted, and we actually secured the bank as our first client. So it was kind of a friendly parting of the ways. But it was definitely, scary. It was exciting and scary at the same time. Starting a business with very little in the way of sort of a support system, and taking a lot of risks every day. I, because of my funny accent, got assigned to try and open up international markets, and so traveling and just arriving in a city and trying to figure out how on earth to build a business in a country where we had nothing was both exhilarating but also very scary.
So that's interesting. So you were working at the bank, you left there, they became the first client, essentially. That's what you said?
Yes, that's right.
So you said, I'm leaving you, but you're still going to pay me. I love it. I'm leaving, but keep the checks coming.
Yeah, but it actually worked, because they were going to pay much less to us if we could go find other customers for the product. They could pay less for something of even greater value.
Got it. Okay. Yeah. Very, very neat though. Now, for those aspiring entrepreneurs out there, because Chris and I have a lot of people that want to make that leap, what's your advice for them, right? So to give a little more context, maybe they're working in a place right now and they're contemplating making that leap. What should they have in place, or just what's your general advice for them?
Well, I think the first thing is, and it's kind of a little bit of a cliche perhaps by now, but just make sure that it's something you're truly passionate about, because there's nothing that's going to drive your success more than something that is true to your own personal mission. Companies have missions, people have missions. The best way to be an entrepreneur is to align the two, so they're really essentially one. And that what you're doing for work is a drive that you have as a person, not just for work. And then I think finding great people. It's always great to have partners. It's going into business is scary alone. So finding people who share your vision and mission, and to share your values. That's always easier said than done, of course, but I think that some of the best businesses out there are businesses that start with, two or more people who really can come together and align around that common mission.
I love that. And now, Peter, for you seem like a very personable guy. I'm sure you connect really well with employees. A lot of the tech startups, I feel like, have that kind of brainy guy who's kind of a mastermind who kind of puts it all together. Did you have to grow into this role of being more the face of the company and connecting with people in that way, or have you always kind of had that personality?
Well, I am a recovering introvert. I've always been one. I think I've learned over time to get more comfortable, being in front of groups and trying to lead teams. But it's not my natural state by any means. But if I'm really passionate about a mission, then I'm going to do it anyway.
Yeah.
Outstanding. Now, to talk about some of the things that you've done, you've had incredible success at scaling companies, no doubt. I mean, anybody that's listening, go to Peter Harrison's LinkedIn page and just look at that. It's absolutely incredible what you've done. Can you share just some of the principles or strategies that you've used when scaling a company? Because you've done it from, I think I read, 0 to 56 million, and just, it's been incredible. So can you share some of those principles or strategies that you've maybe used?
Yes, I think if I had to collapse it down into one core thought for starting a business, it's that you have to, when you start, you have to start with a fairly broad collection of ideas. It would be a mistake to have, I think, one very, very fixed idea, because you need to test and you need to learn and you need to evaluate and narrow down as you do that testing and learning. So I think the best businesses tend to start quite broad, opportunistically sort of testing different ideas and seeing what connects and what doesn't connect. But then as quickly as you can, not too fast, but as quickly as you can, you really need to narrow down to that one thing that you can do and truly be world class at. And so that, the challenge there, of course, is how quickly to do that, and making sure that you don't do it so quickly you pick the wrong thing. You don't do it so slowly that you run out of resources in the process. But finding that one hedgehog, that one thing that's really going to drive your business and drive its growth and elevate your brand and make you special. And then be very thoughtful how you broaden. I've seen companies that broaden too quickly. They expand into other areas. It dilutes their brand, dilutes their focus. They're no longer world class. And so, that I think of it as almost like an hourglass. Starting broad, getting narrow, finding that thing that's really world-class, and then slowly over time knowing when to add and broaden. That to me is like the central lesson of entrepreneurship.
Brilliant advice.
Yeah, I love that. Do you have any examples of times maybe early on where you experienced some turbulence, in scaling companies, and maybe some things you've learned?
Yes, I think, particularly, my current company probably thought it was at the stage where it should be broadening, but it was actually still at the stage where it should have been narrowing. So it's an easy mistake to make. And I think, it's hard to know exactly where you are on that curve. My first company, Sear, didn't broaden quickly enough. We stayed too narrow for too long. And then we suffered the innovator's dilemma and got out innovated by a company companies that sort of came and did the next generation while we were still clinging to the first. And then still a third company that probably focused too much on something too far out, Horizon 2 and 3, and wasn't spending enough and investing enough in the here and now. So there's so many ways to fail in business and only a few to really succeed. But I think the biggest key of all is persistence. And if you look at my success, in my career, and I've had now, this is my fourth startup, and all three of the previous went on to successful exits. It's really about not giving up. It's about persisting and sticking with it, and turning time into your friend.
And now a follow-up to those before we jump into the other topic. There's a lot of people that say find a niche, dominate a niche. You're saying to be broad, but just to clarify, do you mean broad within a niche, essentially? That, maybe you narrow down a niche, but you have several products or services that you're playing with to test in that niche, essentially, and then you narrow down to that, as you said, I think hedgehog, and then you kind of broaden?
Yes, I'm really describing the process of finding that niche, which is, you have to, by definition, you have to try a bunch of different things before you find that niche. You're very unlikely to the very first idea you have to be the right idea, the one that's going to drive the business. So I think by starting broad, I mean, be willing to experiment with a number of different things, but then as quickly as you can find that one thing.
Now, you've been with Snagajob for several years now. They were, I know, doing really well, company culture-wise and everything before you got there. Was them bringing you on to help with the scaling of the business?
Yeah, so I was brought on by their investors about 4 years ago, and the company was doing well, but I think it was probably not growing as fast as it might have. And as I sort of looked at the business, it became clear to me that they were trying to do too many things. They had, as I mentioned earlier, they'd sort of broadened too quickly and were spreading themselves too thin. And therefore there was no one thing that they were absolutely killer at. And so part of my job coming in was to get them to refocus and make sure that they really were world-class at that one thing before they started to add and expand others. And in doing so, really got the business on a much better growth path. So the business was growing and doing well and profitable, but just not growing at the rate it should have. And it was just simply because it was too dispersed.
I think that's a great example for businesses across the board, whether it's a huge company or mom and pop diner down the street of what are we good at, what we need to focus on that people are going to love us for, and from there then we can expand to dinner hours or to brunch hours or whatever else, but let's get our core identity straight first.
That's right.
Yeah, excellent point. Now, to jump into another topic, can you share how you build a strong culture in an organization?
Yeah, I think culture starts with I think mission and values. Mission because you really ultimately you want to attract people who are drawn to your mission, and that's sort of a really important tool for helping select and draw in people into your orbit, into your sphere, into your company who share a passion around your mission. But then that's not enough. They also need to share values. And so, having a sort of clearly articulated values and a really simple set. I mean, I see companies that really go overboard in values and have 20 or 30 values, and it's just too much, too many, too confusing. I'm a big believer in keeping it really simple. So there's one mission, maybe 3 or 4 core values that they're going to be the values that you look for as you look to bring people into the company. You're going to really sort of evaluate them on that value axis. You can and should be colorblind and gender blind, but not value blind. And getting the right people that share your mission and share those values, I think is at the heart of building any great business and any great culture. And great culture is the key to great business, of course.
Absolutely. Yeah. On our last podcast episode, we had a marketer, Scott Stratton. Sean, what's the quote he used?
It's building up your people in order to build your business, essentially. You can't just be focused on building the business. You got to be focused on the people who are building the business.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. And I would say, it's really essentially attracting great people, empowering those people, ensuring they're aligned, and, supporting them with all your heart. And so, it is, people are at the heart of any great business, but having a common culture, common mission is sort of the operating system. And you need both.
And I think something that happens as well with people that are starting up companies, that there's a life cycle with a startup. And if a startup is close to falling apart or resources are becoming scarce, it's hard for sometimes those individuals at the top to act and operate in a way that supports driving a strong culture. They start maybe squeezing people a little too hard because their fear of running out. So I think, for those individuals that are in different life cycles of the startup, you got to be very, very careful and keenly aware on how you're operating, because the tone comes from the top, right, Peter?
I couldn't agree more. And so, the mission and values are inviolate. You can't and you mustn't compromise them. Vision will change, strategy will change, tactics will change, but the mission and values have to stay constant.
What are some examples of culture killers, or I've heard them called energy vampires before, that people need to be aware of as it relates to their organizations?
Well, I think the most obvious to me would be, bringing in people, particularly senior people who may give lip service to the values but don't live the values. It's all too easy to do, unfortunately. It's still very hard to know until you work with people for a little while if they really truly align with your values. And I think one has to be willing to very quickly identify and accept if you've brought somebody on who you thought aligned with the values doesn't align with the values. You need to be very quick to acknowledge that and make adjustments, because that to me, especially when you bring in senior people with more junior people, A, they don't have the influence, and B, they tend to be a little bit more malleable and will adjust themselves to the values that are established in the norms more easily. But senior people or established or people further on in their career, it's really hard if they're not, and they can have a huge impact if you're not careful, a negative impact if you're not careful.
And let's just say that right now you were jumping into a company that had a bad culture, right? You have a feeling as soon as you get around everybody in the company, and it is vampires sucking energy out of you. Where do you begin in starting to create either a strategy for change? Where do you dig your heels in at first, and where do you go from there?
So I think you start with, getting back to your values, making sure that they are the right values and that they're clearly articulated and that people understand them, and realize that you're going to use those values not just to attract people and hire people, but to develop and retain and maybe remove people, and that that's the filter, that's the lens that you're going to use, and be quite clear that if people really aren't on board with these values, if they don't share these values, they should be encouraged to look elsewhere, because I think people are smart. I mean, if you're clear about that and you're really upfront about it, and if they recognize that that's not what they want, and now that it's harder when they don't recognize that that's what they want, and you have to help them reach that reality. But I think leading by example, making sure the core team are really aligned around it, and that's where it starts. I think it's quite often a problem with a company where if you have a core team, let's say you've got a core team of 4 or 5 leaders, that team has to put each other first. They have to be completely aligned around the values, and they have to put each other first. where it all goes wrong is if each of those leaders think of their own team as their first team. So if there's, somebody who's running the kitchen and he thinks of everybody in the kitchen as his team or her team and not of the leadership team as his team, that's where it can go awfully wrong. So it has to start with that core cohesive group at the top who are aligned around the values, live the values, and put themselves first, put their team, that leadership team first, and then model that and push that down to their teams.
Right. And reminding each other that, hey, we're all on the same mission here. Like, I have your back, you have my back, and at the end of the day, like, we're all in this together.
Yeah. I mean, it would be like parents parenting children where the parents didn't sort of agree on some of their core values and where they don't put each other first. They put their kids before each other. That's sort of the surest way, I think, to really undermine the culture.
Sean's a new father, so hopefully he's taking notes.
That's right.
Your spouse comes first, your kids come second.
Yeah, I've heard that. So I'm definitely on board. I'm sitting here listening to this, and I can pinpoint a time in my career when I put my team first. I had a team of employees, and as you were talking, I can clearly see how every one of the leadership team members did that, is that they would take a sword for their team and not for each other. And one of the teams that I was with at that time, that moment in time that I'm mentioning, ended up falling apart. There was not, it wasn't a great environment, and there had to be some change, and it was eventually change at the top. And again, now that you said this, I can see that leader made sure that we would take a sword for each other, not only just for our teams, but for each other as well, and brought us together. And what you said was just so incredibly valuable. So that outstanding point.
Thank you.
Now, to jump into a topic of leadership, what's your definition? What's Peter's definition of leadership?
Oh, that's a tough one. It's such a powerful word, leadership. I suppose I'd have to say it starts with, your mission and vision, and having a clarity of direction, having a clarity of purpose, which is the mission, and having a clarity of direction, which is the vision. I think that a leader that doesn't have those two things, is really not a leader. So I think that those two, it starts there. It starts with having a clear purpose and having a clear direction, and then from there, it's about, of course, attracting and empowering great people around you that align, that buy into that vision and mission, and aligning them and supporting them.
Has the Snagajob, has the mission or culture even changed at all since you've gotten there, or when you joined it was very clear and you just kind of helped advance the things to move forward?
Yeah, so our mission was very well defined. Putting people in right fit positions so they can maximize their potential and live more fulfilling lives has been the mission from day one. And by the way, we do that predominantly in the restaurant industry. We work with 1 in 4 restaurants today in the U.S., helping them find the right people. So that mission has held constant from the beginning, and we're about a 17-year-old business at this point, so it stood the test of time. I think what has evolved is the vision, and it's necessary, especially in the world of tech, which is so turbulent and so dynamic. I think of mission. I think of visions a little bit like mountains. So you identify a mountain you want to climb over the next period of time. And then, you set out a strategy for how you're going to get to the top of that mountain. You execute that, you get to the top, and now you need to pick a new mountain and a new strategy. And so those necessarily change over time, but the mission remains the same. The values remain the same.
Love that.
You had mentioned that Snagajob has, you said 1 in 4 restaurants. They help support 1 in 4 restaurants. Is that what you said?
That's right. 1 in 4 restaurants in the United States.
And now, just to jump on that for a moment, how have you seen the landscape change with recruiting or job sites, with kind of how we've evolved now in the realm of hourly workers, and especially if we can, kind of focus on the restaurant industry? How have you seen everything kind of change?
Well, I think from a people perspective, we've entered an age of really essentially zero unemployment, where the big opportunity, and in a sense the growing opportunity, has been underemployment. There's very few, if anybody, left today that wants a job, that doesn't have a job. But there are potentially, I think, a growing number of people who want more, right? They don't have enough hours, or they're having to travel too far for their work, or the hours aren't convenient, or maybe they're held back. They're not in the job that they really would aspire to be doing. So there's the massive problem in restaurant. It's true of America as a whole, but in restaurant especially is underemployment, and just the vast inefficiency we have. If you look at how people manage their time and the gaps in schedules, and they have time, but they're not working that time. There are other times where they're in 12-hour shifts. There's just an awful lot of waste there. And then, matching, people aren't, still in this day and age, it's shocking. There's more science in dating than there is in matching people with work opportunities. And so really, finding a way to bring the power of big data and machine learning to identifying the right people for the right opportunity.
And you guys at Snagajob, I know you have a great company culture. I know you put your employees first, and that's really high on the priority list. That has to translate over into the idea that you're trying to do the same for these companies. You're trying to equip them with the same types of people. How does that correlate to each other? Yeah.
So we've taken a page out of Danny Meyer's playbook here, where we put ourselves first. We call people at Snagajob snaggers. So snaggers come first. Actually, our workers come second. The people who were helping find work, and our employers, who are mostly restaurants, come third. And we're quite deliberate about that. By the way, our investors come fifth. I think our partners come fourth, and our investors come fifth. So that's our sort of priority stack ranking. We think it's okay to put ourselves first, because if we put ourselves first, we're going to deliver a better result for our customers. We're going to rally around, support each other, and do a better job for our customers. We put workers before the employers, because we think if we do what's right for the worker, that's ultimately going to be what's right for the employer. They want the right worker. They want, they value our relationship, knowing how to find the right worker at the right time. And so that's our sort of our pyramid, and it's worked very well for us.
Have you read Danny's book, Setting the Table?
I have. I'm a big fan. In fact, he came and spoke at our customer conference 2 weeks ago. He delivered the keynote and talked about the hospitality quotient, and we're big fans.
Oh, very cool.
I love it. And for anybody that hasn't gone to the Snagajob website, if you watch the video on the homepage, I'm not going to lie, Peter, I felt like applying. It looks fun. It looks fun. I was going to send a proposal to pitch for you to acquire my company just so I can be an employee there. It looks like a great place. Now, one thing about Snagajob, I think that both Chris and I were curious about, and this kind of goes into the business side of it, is that there's some companies that they have products or services for one demographic or one person, but Snagajob has two customers. You've got the companies who are looking for employees and the job seekers. How do you all manage these two areas effectively?
Yeah, that's a great point, and it is a challenge. We're really more of a marketplace business with workers on one side and employers on the other, and we have a relationship with both. We add about 1 million new members a month that are workers. We have over 300,000 employers on the site at any one time, and we're kind of a matchmaker between these restaurants and these workers, and it's not an easy balance. It's a little bit like Google if you think of their business today, because it's of course free to the consumer, but they make a lot of money from businesses who want to sell services to the consumer. So while they have to put the consumer first and make a great search product, they also have to deliver real value to the employer. So it's a difficult balance to achieve, but I think it is the key for a business like ours.
And what do you see on the horizon for Snagajob, with the future moving forward?
Yeah, so we are really, really excited about blurring the line between helping a worker snag a job and helping a worker snag a shift. We already have the market leading app for this with the job space. So helping somebody really just from their phone find a job, apply for the job, and get hired. And now what we're working on and we're running as a pilot is the next step of that, which is having found the job, check in, check out, rate, and get paid. And where that especially makes sense is if you were somebody who's not getting enough hours, maybe you're capped at 30 hours, but you want 40. And so helping those people pick up an additional shift or two each week in a business that's maybe very similar, where they have the right sort of skills, the right capabilities. And you can imagine how this would be valuable to the employer too, who has gaps in their schedule. They have call outs, they have peaks or events they need to handle where they need suddenly 3 or 4 additional staff. So blurring the line between snagging a job and snagging a shift is the next horizon for Snagajob, and one I'm super excited about. I think it's really going to sort of revolutionize how we think of people in the restaurant segment.
You just prompted so many thoughts. One of the things in the culinary industry that is popular is staging at different places, right? To get some experience and working with different individuals. I mean, I can already see, based upon what you said, an ecosystem where maybe maybe I'll just use Orlando here where I'm from. So in Orlando, there's maybe 7 restaurants and they all band together. Those owners, operators, chefs, they band together and now they are using the SnagAShift, and now workers can kind of cycle in between different places and get different experience and learn from the different chefs and kind of have a taste of what it's like to stage while still getting paid at all these different places and picking up a plethora of experience as opposed to just being at one. I don't know. I don't know, Chris, what's your thoughts?
Yeah, absolutely. I also see a huge opportunity. For instance, there's a huge, it's called Harborfest coming up this weekend here in Norfolk, Virginia area. And it's only for, 4 or 5 days, where there's no point in actually hiring, a full-time staff, but there's definitely shifts that need to be covered, or maybe you just need extra people for a certain amount of time. I think it's perfect for something like that too.
That's exactly right. So what's great about this vision is that it's an idea as time is right. It's good for the worker and good for the employer. We've got a tremendously warm reception from both sides that really want this, and it's really only now with the power of all these technologies coming together, the cloud and the phone and the location services and machine learning and ratings and reviews and badging and assessments, that all of these things come together and make this possible now.
I think it's very, very interesting. I'm definitely going to follow along with that. Last question, Peter. What's on the horizon for yourself?
Well, that's a big enough horizon for me. I get charged by doing things like this and feeling like we can really we can really make a big impact. We can, there's only a small number of people unemployed, but there's 40 or 50 million people underemployed. So I get really excited every day about helping those 40 to 50 million people get more work, get the right work, where they want it, when they want it, and living up to their full potential.
Very, very neat. Well, Peter, it's been an outstanding conversation with you. I appreciate you taking the time. Chris, any last questions for him?
I just want to say thank you so much. I look forward to getting up to Richmond and DC soon and hopefully connecting with some of you guys.
Chris and Sean, it's been an absolute pleasure.
Absolutely.
Thank you, Peter.
Yeah, bye now.
So that was our conversation with Peter Harrison. Sean, that was fun. Takeaways for you.
There was several that I had. I even said it while we were talking to him, but I think one of the most profound ones was when he was talking about the leadership team and how they have to put themselves first. That hit home with me. As I mentioned when we were talking to him, there was a time period in my career when that was not the case. And I put my team first and not the leadership team. And I actually had rifts with some of the other leadership team members. And I can see where we had a toxic environment, and we would point fingers at other people essentially as the cause of the toxic environment, but it was because we weren't on the same page. So that was so profound for me. There was a leader that showed myself and other individuals a very different way of operating and pulled us together, and now that's how we act. But that was just a profound point, I think, for everybody. Another one was starting wide and narrowing down and testing until you find that niche. I think that's incredibly valuable. And then the third one, which I thought was outstanding, was the hourglass analogy, that there's a narrowing stage, and then you find that, as he said, that hedgehog, and then from there there's a broadening stage. And I think what's incredibly difficult is knowing, where are you in that hourglass? Are you in the narrowing or are you in the broadening? And his experience shines through. It literally cut through, because he obviously is an individual that can tell where a company is in that hourglass, which makes him so valuable. And I love talking with him. What about you?
It's very cool. And, Sean, I love how you always steal my thunder here at the end. You always have 3 or 4 or 8 different points, leaving me with the few straggling points I left over. But no, it was awesome. For me, I love hearing too about the idea of management and how we need to have each other's back before we have our team's back. Really, from the top down. But aside from that too, I love just hearing over and over again, whether it's talking about scaling businesses or creating company culture, but it's the idea of mission and values. And I also loved how he talked about, your values never change, your mission never changes, but your vision is kind of like climbing a mountain, where you climb that mountain, but now it's time for a new mountain, a new vision. So what's next, and figuring that out. So yeah, I loved what he had to say. I think Snagajob, he's doing a great job with them. And it's very clear with the success that they're having, being the number one in the marketplace for hourly workers. So it was very cool to connect. You can connect with Peter on Twitter at PCJHarrison, or you can connect with Snagajob, which is at Snagajob, easy enough. And one final quote from Peter to leave you with, something for you to think about, and I know I will as well, is he says, "I love growing and building things. What about you?" So that's from Peter Harrison. Let us know your thoughts. Share with him on Twitter, and let us know what you think. Until next time, signing off.